I wanted to just say welcome everyone to our webinar today, hosted by the photo managers, all about preserving your legacy. And so we're really glad that you're here today with us to talk about this really important topic. Whether you're a professional who helps clients safeguard their memories, or you're someone looking to ensure your own family's stories live on for future generations, today's session is designed to provide you with valuable insights and actionable steps towards that journey. As you'll learn today, legacy preservation is more than just organizing photos or recording family stories. It's about creating a lasting impact that connects generations. It also allows us to reflect and relive important memories and milestones of our own lives. And in this webinar, we'll explore why preserving your personal or client's legacy matters and how you can do it in a way that's meaningful and sustainable. So we're going to start today with a short presentation by Peter, and then we will share a little bit about some courses that we have developed on this topic. And then at the end, we'll share a discount if you want to take those courses. So I'm going to hand it over to Peter to get us started with some information about legacy preservation.
Okay, welcome everyone. I'm going to do about a 20-minute presentation here. A lot of this is sourced from the course that I did, but it's just a way for me to kind of communicate some of the things that I think are important, and hopefully you will as well. I just want to first thank Kathy and Isabel at the Photo Managers. Really both helped in creating and supporting this course. And my interest in legacy work began with my communication with clients. I found that I had been kind of managing, as a photo manager, these giant messes that were getting kind of larger and larger. And I didn't think there was any really long-term, viability towards this course. Where we seemed to be going was really untenable. And so the more I thought about it, the more attempts I made with my own family history, the more I realized I wanted to kind of bring this information to my clients and really anyone else who would listen. And that's why I created this course. Let's just say I had no idea how down the rabbit hole I was going to go when I was creating this course, and where it was going to take me. It was a joy, but it was an enormous amount of work. And a lot of it I knew or had experience from my photo managing work over the years, but I also had to learn quite a bit and do a lot of research, as well as talk to people who had more experience and in these areas and were able to help me. In the end, I really think I was able to bring forth a lot of helpful information, and my hope was really to connect the dots of a lot of the different areas related to legacy work. And I mentioned this in the course. I didn't want to do a how-to course so much as a how do you want to course, because I think a lot of this is about kind of finding your own journey and path. And so I just wanted, that was the idea of connecting the dots to kind of give everybody, the information that they can kind of create their own roadmap. This is one of my favorite photos. This is taken in the 50s in Queens, New York, where I was born. And, it has kind of a pod people look to it. My mother is kind of smiling. She looks unaffected, and I'm in the carriage kind of looking off to the side. But everyone else seems to have been taken over by pod people. And I kind of love this picture. It just cracks me up. And I think, I always come back to the same photos over and over again. And, when I mentioned we're having, libraries of 50, 60,000, we need to address that and find the photos that really kind of emotionally connect to us that we use over and over again. And I'll talk about that. So, what is a legacy? Well, it's something that is a part of your history or that remains from an earlier time. Something that is transmitted by or received from an ancestor or a predecessor or from the past, and something that is passed on. And I realize that, we are exactly at the point between our past and our future. Our ancestors and our descendants, right? That's where we are. So, what is our responsibility if we want to think about that question? So, in passing on a legacy, we're responsible for collecting and acquiring the items to be passed on, deciding what gets passed on. We actually become the curators of our family histories and stories. We're responsible for the format and means of how that legacy is presented, and we're responsible for ensuring that the legacy is preserved and lived on. And I just want to mention, some people have remarkable family histories and stories, but many people don't. Just family stuff. But it's important to remember that really everybody's lives through remarkable times, and their experiences and their observations about those times are as valid a part of a legacy as may be their own immediate family stories. And I just mention that because if you're a photo manager, that's something to communicate to clients who may be asking about that. And there are also those who have no family to pass their legacy to, but there are ways in which their stories and their history can endure. And I'll talk about that kind of at the end when I talk about kind of personal historical archives. So, what's been the best archival method ever invented? I'm being a little glib here, but there's truth to it. Cave drawings and pictographs have endured for thousands and thousands of years, right? But, we are not really going to be scribbling on the walls about our family history. So, we've come up traditionally with things like family albums. This is my mother's album. And you can see how brittle and faded and, it starts to degrade over the years. And this is an issue that, that we're seeing now. um, we also, put photos up around the house on picture frames. This is the refrigerator in my home a few years ago. But I grew up in a house where my mom, she like stuck photos into a cork board with push pins. And I looked at those photos every single day sitting in the kitchen. And those photos told the story of my life. They're the ones that I really connected to. So here we are with digital libraries and, 50, 60, where is it even going? People are taking 10,000 photos a year. No one is going to want that, right? No one is going to want that. If I told my 19-year-old son, here, son, here's my Apple Photos library, all, 100,000 of them are all yours. He'd run for the hills. So we have to find a kind of a way that makes sense to kind of pass these things on. What I've kind of come up with, I don't want to call it a system, but just some guideposts to first we collect, and then we curate, and then we create, and then we archive. What does this mean? Let's kind of go into it a little bit. So when we collect, we're really aggregating everything, and that includes physical photos, films, negatives, and so forth. And we'll talk about digitizing in a second, but also our digital assets and where they might be, and kind of aggregating, collecting them all. That's what really needs to be done. And it's not something that happens overnight, but it's something that really is the first step. And I recommend importing it into a library. And I'm not going to go into details about a lot of this stuff here, but just kind of give you a general idea. In collecting this, it's really important. This is what I learned from a lot of people like archivists and people who is the importance of respecting and considering where the things we're collecting are coming from. So these are archival terms. I go through the definitions in the course, but respect to fonds and provenance are essentially like if somebody in your past and your family put together some letters or some photos or an album or everything, we don't want to kind of, pull that apart. We there was a reason for the people that did these things, and we need to respect it and learn from it. And because essentially they did what we're doing now, and there was an intention which we need to understand. So we want to kind of keep things, as we find them, at least initially. And then we want to scan. We do a lot of scanning. prints and negatives and all this stuff. We want to archive a lot of the original stuff because they're beautiful and there's something really wonderful about having the actual items. But, I live in Los Angeles and, it became very personal when I had to grab things and realize like, this may be all I have left from my life. And, the digitization of these things is at least a way of preserving them, not in their original form, but it is essential. So in the course, I talk about how to recognize, and organize prints and how to learn when and where they may have been taken if we don't have information. They each have characteristics. You can see the picture of the cat there. It has those push pin holes. That was one of the prints on my mother's cork board. But prints have different characteristics depending on when they were done, and that can really help in organizing. Sometimes we write information on the back. Half of my family was German, and they wrote a lot of stuff in this German cursive, which even people who understand, read, and write German can't interpret. It's just so thick. Which is kind of interesting. So negatives, slides and transparencies, you don't necessarily need to digitize all of them, but you want to curate them, and we'll talk about that in a second. Letters and documents, man, I have learned so much from these things, and we'll talk about researching in a second. Scrapbooks, diaries, these are amazing places to find information about people and yourself. That bottom one is my old diary I kept when I was a kid, and who remembers what you write? So I went back and I was like, I kind of helped me remember who I was back then. And a lot of this is about jarring memory so that we can tell the stories. Ephemera is wonderful because it connects to events that meant something, right? And so, collecting those things to archive them, again, the originals, but also to digitize them. And, ephemera can be digitized simply by photographing them. And you can do that, as simply as with your iPhone or a little bit of a more sophisticated setup. That's up to you. The curation process is really where it all begins. Curating what you've collected is essential because, as I said, no one wants 100,000 photos. And what I've talked about, and I've been talking about for years, is this idea of a legacy collection. And a legacy collection is essentially, it's the most important images. It's the one that tells the stories. It's the ones that emotionally connected to. They're the images that you want to look at over and over again and that you want to use over and over again. I saw a post on the photo manager's Facebook site about somebody, I don't remember the details, but they didn't have photos for a slideshow for somebody. I think their parent was going into hospice. So when you create a legacy collection, which I go through in great detail on how to do that and how to even edit it and curate it, you have those images to access, literally at your fingertips. And that's so important. You don't want to kind of have to go through 100,000 photos every time you want to find something. And a legacy collection is something that is, because it's curated and manageable, it can be archived much more simply. And that is really critical. So again, I talk about how to edit. Editing is storytelling. How large it should be. Do you do 20 to 30 photos a year or 10 to 30 photos a decade? To me, that sound astonishing, but there's a humility to kind of curating your legacy collection. If you're just part of the family chain, if somebody down the road is looking back and they see, 10 pictures of your grandparents and maybe 20 pictures of your parents, and then, 50,000 of you, they're going to go, wow, who's this person? Why do they get 50,000, right? And so unless you're quite a, renowned person, you're kind of part of that chain. So, that humility in terms of curating your own life story down, not, for you to have to look at on a daily basis. We want our libraries with as many pictures as we want, but for archiving, you do need to kind of curate it considerably. And I talk again about how to do the curation. Um, uh, and really how to even organize it. If you bring it into Apple Photos or Lightroom or whatever it is you're working with, there's always tools that you can use to do the archiving. Um, Connecting is a word that you hear a lot about, legacy work. When I started to do some research on my family history, I did it online. I'll go through some of those resources, but I also found letters and documents, and it just it literally would blow my mind, the information I would find. I had these things, but I never had the patience to kind of sit and read them and learn about what people were experiencing and what they wrote about. It's a shame we don't write letters anymore. It's going to be lost. I don't think we have the same kind of communication and emails and texts. And, will we be archiving memes in the future? I have no idea. But letters and documents were really where I started to kind of learn my connection to my family, and linking to the past, looking to the future, and realizing that responsibility of being in that position, and understanding it was also kind of an honor to be the family historian doing this. Um, so we talk about, in researching, facts which come from records and documents, although they can be a little off too. Firsthand accounts from letters and retelling. Secondhand accounts, which is, the stories you hear at Thanksgiving, not as reliable, but they do make good stories. But, this is all about kind of aggregating this information. And how to start researching. You start with yourself and your parents. You have to know certain things, obviously the relationship to them. You want to start with dates like births, deaths, marriage, naturalization, military service, things like that. It helps in the researching, which as you start to do it, you will get better at. I'll show some of those resources in a minute. I did recording of others. I had the wherewithal to record my mom. She passed away a few years ago at 99, but I recorded her in her early 90s. And she, it was great to have this recordings, and not just the video, but the audio. The audio is something I use a lot in some of the things that I create. You can do really nice quality video. This is just a snapshot of it. But I've also done recordings over Zoom for my aunt who lives back in New York, and my cousin who lives in DC. And the audio, the video is pretty bad, but again, I can take that audio and strip it out and put like stills and records and letters over it and create little kind of video chapters of my family. So we talk about how to do recording and kind of capturing these stories. Um, Researching online, it's an amazing, there's so much out there. Many people are familiar with the premium sites like, 23andMe. Oh, I think they folded, and, there's a whole bunch of them. But there's a lot of free ones too. And there's the free ones are often where some of these places kind of source their records from. So I always encourage people to go to the free places. Family Search is one of the best resources, but the National Archives is great. There's individual smaller little historical and genealogical societies that you can find around the country and around the world. And if you do go to the paid sites, you can do like a month free, a free trial, or pay for a month and just kind of get everything you can and then cancel. That's what I do. And I get a lot of stuff that way. Talk about family trees. I love family trees. Family trees were traditionally kind of a more decorative thing. And, we do family. This is my German family tree, which was typed out very carefully and passed down to me over generations. And this is the family tree of my German side of my family. Um, that I was able to get on Family Search. They have auto-generated family trees. Went back to like the 1700s. Crazy, crazy. Now, the trouble with these things is in this form, they're not archivable. And that's why there's a beauty to kind of creating an actual manual family tree, if you will, because that becomes an archivable product that you can archive digitally, and if you print it out, you can save it that way. So that's everything I think of as in terms of what's archivable and preservable. Storytelling projects. Uh, we I go through how to create. I think creating and creativity is just a great part of this process because, otherwise it becomes kind of pretty mundane. When you get into the creative aspects of storytelling projects, analog and digital, it actually really becomes fun. Analog would be photo books. That these books have been one of the most reliable sort of ways of archiving things because they can last for 100 years. But if create a photo book, it's reprintable, and even prior to digital, books were reprinted, and that's why they were able to be passed on. So the standard ways, books and prints, are just really tried and true ways of preserving things. And we have so many options out there. Digital storytelling, slideshows. I do these little video chapters, which is what I was referencing before when I showed you the stuff with my mother and my cousins. And these are in video format that can be archived. And I'll talk about digital archiving in a second. There are a lot of companies that are popping up that are kind of serving, legacy is kind of like the buzzword. And I just really want everyone to do their due diligence with new companies, read the terms of service, read their mission statement, right? A lot of companies, will make it very clear they are there to help you. But a lot of companies are not. Bigger companies, I won't mention any big names, but we know who they are. They're out to serve their shareholders. So they can pivot, and a service they provided for free may disappear. So you want to be careful. And I like to kind of work with companies whose sole mission is to preserve, to serve their customers and to preserve the things for their customers. And I talk about that a bit. Um, and again, everything I think of is in terms of what can be archived. If it can't be archived, it's if it's proprietary, and a lot of these companies create these proprietary products. It's useless to me because I can't archive it. So that is a question you should always ask before, entering in with a service or product is, can it be archived on its own? Or are you going to be tied to this company in order to do that? If you are, then it's not really in your best interest. So there's analog preservation and digital preservation. I'm getting to the end of this. But I do, obviously, this is where it all kind of goes. So, these are the traditional methods from my friends at Archival Methods, to preserve slides, prints, negatives, documents, all this great stuff. They should be preserved in ways to make sure that they're going to be preserved for longer periods of time. And so these simple steps can be done to do that. Now with digital, this is like where the questions are. There are no digital hard drives, right? There are no tried and true digital art. We just hasn't been around that long. So this, will become this, right? The hard drives we're using will be kind of as obsolete as the floppy disk. So we have to kind of come up with a way of making sure that there's a succession to the hard drives that we're using. Yes, we do use hard drives. We don't need to go out and spend tons of money on, crazy expensive systems because they'll probably be obsolete before long anyway. There will be new technology. So what we want to do is make sure that our process with hard drives is then able to be to passed on in whatever that new technology is. I talk a lot about that, and as well as offsite backup and how you can take steps I suggest to do this. And a lot of it is keeping current with ports and plugs and all the new kind of adapters that you will need to plug into your computers. These old hard drives probably won't be able to be plugged into newer computers down the road. So we have to always keep current with new technologies and adapt and keep everything redundant, add our legacy collection and the things that we're archiving updated on our drive so that we can kind of keep doing it. And if you do physical preservation or digital, it's important to understand you need to identify things. That's critical. So for physical, there's a thing called a finding aid, which is basically a summary of the collection, it has all the names of things and the different collections and where to find them. Because you have to understand, you don't want to be like everyone, I'm sure, has photos of people that they've been, handed from their past, and they have no idea who they're looking at, or else it's in German cursive. But whatever the case, you want to be able to make sure people down the road understand who and what they're looking at, right? So a finding aid is the traditional way of doing that. For digital, it's metadata, captions, keywords, and you can create finding aids as well. But the important thing to remember is whatever you preserve, you need to identify. So again, 50,000 photos, unless you can identify all of them, not really going to be much value to anybody down the road. Lastly, this is a wonderful way of ensuring and archiving and preserving. There's one company and one nonprofit, and I don't usually mention companies, but this is called permanent.org. They're a nonprofit, and they've created personal historical archives, right? So if you've ever seen a historical archive, this is set up in a very similar fashion, only it's anybody can use it. And you can create an account and then build out as many archives for individuals that you want. And you can write stories about them, and you can post pictures and videos and letters, and you really just tell the story of a person or people in your family. And if you're a professional photographer like me, maybe you want some of the projects or things that you've done in the past, part of your life's work to live on. So you can create pages and archives for that. And it's extremely reasonable. And a lot of people know that I do work with these because I really believe in the value of them. And this is why, because they will outlive you, not to be morbid, but you can create what's called a legacy contact and an archive steward so that when you pass or become infirmed, all your work lives on. And that's the question you always have to ask when these other companies is there a legacy contact? Is there a process of succession? Because otherwise all your work will be lost. Well, it won't be with a nonprofit like permanent.org. And there's another company called Forever, and it's the same thing. They have the ability to pass it on past your lifetime. And this really does fulfill that kind of promise of digital archiving and succession. And hopefully they're able to keep it up. Their intentions are really good. And I believe that they will be able to do it. They kind of guarantee it for 100 years plus your lifetime. We will see, but it's the best options out there. Just lastly, succession is about a legacy contact, because there's somebody who will need to shepherd the hard drives and all that technology when you pass or become infirmed. So I talk about, finding a family member, preferably somebody younger, and how to pass on the instructions and websites and passwords and all these things you need to kind of think about. Apple and Android both have legacy contact abilities, and talk a little about that. And that is really, at the end of it, that's the importance of legacy work, is making sure it lives on, right? Not just creating the stuff, but making sure that there's a succession to it. So I hope that's been helpful. We'll get back to this in a second, but I am going to pass, and there'll be question and answers later, but I hope that was helpful. I'm going to pass it back to Isabel here, and we'll move on.
Thanks so much, Peter. That was great. And as I hopefully everyone has now learned, is that preserving your legacy, it's really important and meaningful, but it can also be an overwhelming process with a lot of steps. You're working with a lot of photos, videos, documents, and stories that you have to sort through. And it can be easy to feel stuck and unsure where to begin or what to go through and what the steps are. And so having a clear framework is really what can turn that impossible task into something that's more manageable and rewarding. And so whether you're preserving your family's memories or helping clients with theirs, a structured approach ensures that nothing important gets lost or overlooked. It also helps you avoid common mistakes, streamline the process, and create a collection that is not only well organized, but also meaningful and accessible for generations to come. So that's where our legacy preservation courses come in, as Peter has been sharing. There are two courses. We have one that's intended more for everyone to preserve your own legacy, both professionals to preserve their own legacy as well as their clients. And then we have a second course that is intended primarily or exclusively for professionals to learn how to do these types of projects with clients. And if you take both, you have the opportunity to become a legacy preservation specialist and receive a little special badge that you can use to promote your services. And so we wanted to, as part of this webinar, offer a small discount that, Peter, if you can share your screen again, we're offering 10% off the legacy courses with the code legacy10. It's valid until February 21st. And I will go ahead and add the links to the chat. But if there are any questions at this point, either about legacy preservation or the courses, we are here to help you. I am going to leave the mute option or the microphone option off for now, just to keep this more manageable. So if you have questions, go ahead and ask those in the chat and we will go ahead and answer them. So Peter, there's one question here from Anna. Don't I need to get rid of copies of digital photos and get those photos on my computer organized before I curate?
I'm not sure I understand. Can you read that again?
Would you need to get rid of copies, or I guess duplicates, get
Oh.
those organized on your computer before you curate?
Yeah, duplicates, feel like the boogeyman, but they're really, if you find the best versions of them to archive, put in your legacy collection, that's more important. It's always good to dedupe, and it's becoming simpler if you're an Apple Photos user. There's a built-in deduper, and there's third-party ones as well. But you're going to be identifying the images in your legacy collection, both in your library and then creating a separate archive of those digital images. So, if you just are working with one copy of that photo, if you do have duplicates, that's more important. But you can dedupe it. I think that's what she was asking, or he was asking.
Yes, I think that answered it. And hopefully, if not, let us know. There were questions about sharing the presentation. And so we will have the recording up on our YouTube channel in a few days. And you'll be able to watch that as many times as you want. There's a question here from JC. Peter, what are the main differences between forever and permanent? How do you choose?
Well, they look different. They have a different feeling. Forever.com has been around a long time. It's simple to use. It's set up. It kind of has a smug mug type of feeling, or kind of a traditional, photo albums and accessible. It's not as great for storytelling, and I find, to me, permanent. It has the feeling, as I said, of a historical archive. Um, and it tells stories, I think, a little better. It's a little clunkier to use, but they're really getting better and better. And I've seen them make major advances. One of the just real differences is on Forever, you can store videos, but you can't play videos that you've uploaded unless you get an additional subscription plan for videos. With Permanent, you can upload and view videos. So that is one of the things people sometimes talk about. You can get like 30-day trials. So I would encourage it and see which kind of feels better to you. And Permanent is starting a new thing called the Legacy Lab, which is kind of a 1 month journey where you kind of work with others and have weekly meetings. And it's really great because you can be working with others and seeing what others are doing and learning in the process. And, it's very hard sometimes to get past the procrastination. And so something like that can really kind of aid in kind of pushing you forward. Highly recommend it.
And do you have any advice on capturing and storing web content about people? So I guess articles, videos that are on the web about people where you're preserving the legacy. So, your own articles or something that's been written about you.
Well, I mean, you're kind of at the mercy of whoever is hosting that article, I guess. What you want to do, as I've mentioned, is get something that is archivable. So, um, you could take the content and put it into a PDF. You could find some way of making the web content viewable and it's close to its original form as possible. If you can kind of create a standalone, one thing you could do is you could do a screen recording of the website as you scroll through it, and that might capture the experience of the website. I guess it depends on how you want to kind of tell the story of it, but again, if it's hosted by a third party, you can refer to a link, but that link probably won't exist in 100 years, so it's not going to be much value.
And someone's asking about deduplication. Where do you find that on your Apple laptop, or how would you go about deduplicating your photos?
If you go into Apple Photos, and I wouldn't do it on your phone, although you could, I believe. But if you go like to the desktop version of Apple Photos, presuming that you are kind of logged in to your iCloud account and that all your Apple Photos are syncing between your devices and your computer, you'll see right there in the left-hand column, there's a deduping tool. And what it does is it's kind of very cool. If you have like different versions of the image, but maybe one has been edited and one has some metadata, one is smaller and one is larger. When you dedupe it, it actually creates the best version of all of them, which is remarkable. And that's the one you keep. So you don't have to kind of decide which one you want. It just, you kind of create the best version of it. That would work really well in life. But yes, so it's pretty simple to use, and that's how you access it.
And Rick here has a really interesting question. How do you keep yourself inspired as you're doing legacy work?
Well, as I mentioned, I think the creativity part is for me the fun part, and the researching. The researching for me was a real. I was really put off by it, but once I start to learn how to do it, and you do learn how to do it. You learn that you have to put in alternative names and dates and things like that. Once you start doing the research, it gets pretty exciting to learn about the things you're going to find, and you're going to be just I was amazed. I'm not going to tell you what you, but I was amazed at how much was out there and how much I was able to find. Naturalization records. My father was put into an internment camp. I found prior to World War II because he was in England and he was of German descent. He never talked about that, and I was able to find it. So, these things will definitely keep you going. And then I found I just kind of burn out. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so overwhelmed. I created an archive on permanent for my father, and then I just kind of stopped doing it for a while, and now I'm going back. So, you can try to do it regularly, but I tend to kind of immerse myself, and then I'm like, I got to get back to some other things. So, however your process works, whatever is kind of intuitive for you, creating products, not products, but creative projects like print books and making prints and the videos that I create. I love doing that. It feels very creative, and it's a great way of capturing the story. So, you find ways. It will happen. It starts kind of very, like got to aggregate, got to collect. Once you get past that, it gets a little better and more fun. Hope that helps.
Thanks, Peter. Um, how do you provide guidance for your successor to continue to add to the family archive after creation of the archive? So adding the next chapters of the family history after the main legacy collection has been
Right.
created. Have any
Yeah.
real life experience you can share?
Yeah, that's really important. So finding that legacy contact is critical. And as I mentioned it, you want it to be a younger generation. My son is 19 and he understands it, but he doesn't kind of get it. And if you have a legacy contact that has started a family, if that's possible, that is usually the turning point when they start getting interested in their previous family history. This is what I have found. Doesn't mean that, like a teenager won't be interested, but usually if you find somebody in their 20s, 30s, or 40s who has a family, that is when they start to get curious and when they start to kind of, become a little more interested in where they came from because now they're thinking about who they may want to pass on. So if you have that, that's great. And if you don't, you find a family member who will be. And if you don't, you have things like permanent.org to kind of put up your family history, and it's searchable and findable and public if you wish it to be. And that is another way that it can live on. So, there's variations, but that's what I got.
And we've talked a little bit about both permanent and forever, as well as Apple Photos. There was another question in the chat about SmugMug. Is that something that's recommended? It's something that someone's currently using.
SmugMug is great for the present and sharing for the present but it's not, there's no legacy succession built in that I've been able to find. I'm actually going to start talking to some of these companies and asking them about it and making them think about it, because really, what's the point of doing all this work if it just kind of fades away at some point, right? That's the problem with so many of these companies. And I'm not saying there's a problem with SmugMug, but again, wouldn't you love to do all that work and then know that it's not going to like go away? I mean, you could set up so somebody takes over the account and this and that, but it's not ideal. You really kind of want a smoother transition, and right now that's kind of limited. So, it's all good, but I'm working with legacy and ability to preserve an archive, and so to me that's the criteria that needs to be filled.
And specifically about the courses, Peter, do you, I know that the working with professionals doesn't cover this in detail anyway, but does your course cover specific genealogical programs like Ancestry?
No, I'm not going to go into particular companies too much. I mention them, but it's up to you. Again, this was about connecting dots. This course, I'm almost afraid to say it, I think it's 4.5 hours. And if I had gone even more down the drilling down, it would have been, God knows how long. So I didn't want to promote companies, but I'll certainly mention them as resources. But as they're always changing too. So I'm not going to mention how to use a particular company too much because it's going to change. So, I want this to be kind of as relevant and non-obsolete for as long as possible. And I think I tried to create the course in that fashion. So, you can find out how to work with, ancestry.com pretty simple, but it doesn't go into it on the course. No.
Um, in terms of services like permanent, does that allow extended family from all over to upload their photos in an organized way?
Yes, there's collaboration, different collaborative levels for forever and permanent that allow different kind of tiers of ability for collaboration. You can make archives public or private. So there's a lot of variation on that, and you have control over pretty much all of it.
There's a question here about some logistical things that I'll answer in terms of how the course is delivered, and how long it is. So the course is online. It's all pre-recorded and self-paced. The videos are anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes, depending on the complexity of the topic. But it's broken down in a really nice way. And there was a question about sort of, other than those resources, the videos and the downloadable resources, is there any interaction with the instructor? And technically, there is no direct interaction at this time, although both Peter and myself are happy to answer questions by email. And then I mentioned in the chat that we do have something called a legacy cafe for the professional level. So if you're if you're in the legacy preservation specialist level, you will have access to what's called a legacy cafe, where people in the course meet together on Zoom once a month and just have conversations, ask questions, and share insights with each other. So it's a great way to connect with your peers through the process.
Isabel, can I answer a question here?
Yes.
Marty Lynn said Forever actually does advertise its succession planning and commitments to continued accessibility. Have you reviewed that and found it not adequate, or is that still to happen? I believe I said Forever is one of the companies or nonprofits that does do it. I think I mentioned Smug Mug does not, at least as far as I know. So I hope there was no confusion. Forever is definitely has the built-in succession, legacy contact, and all that, and it's as adequate as I can imagine. And they have a some kind of system so that the storage lives on again, 100 years plus a lifetime. So
And there's a question about using PhotoMine or mobile scanning apps to scan your photos. Do you have any thoughts
yeah,
on that?
yeah, this is a question that comes up. So I've been working with digital imaging as a photographer in many ways. The question that you always have to ask is, what is the end use? What is the end use? So for 99% of the stuff that you're scanning, the end use is probably, online, posting on social media, sharing digital images. And so for that, if you can get an adequate scan with one of these mobile apps, that's great. It's certainly easier and saves time. However, they are not adequate for reproduction. So if you want to put it into a photo book, if you want to make a print, if you want to do anything that involves physical printing, I have found them to be inadequate. That is just my observation. And, my standards may be a little higher, but I just feel if you have interest, identify the ones that you have interest in reproducing, and take the time to do a higher quality, better scan, at least for those.
Yeah, I think the motto that we go with a lot of times is, something is better than nothing, but quality does matter. And you're not going to get the same quality with a
No.
scan app usually as you would with a, a dedicated scanner or camera scanning. Brenda has a good question that actually it comes up quite a bit in the course and just in our community in general, which is a friend has inherited family photos, but she has no children or close family to leave them to. Do you have ideas for her in terms of how she might preserve her legacy and the value of preserving her legacy?
Well, that's why I think companies like, Forever or nonprofits like Permanent have the ability for us to leave these kind of personal historical archives. So it's got that succession built in, as I mentioned. If you don't have a family member to, directly pass it on, you're kind of reliant on third party to some degree. You can also look and see if there's uh, historical value to some of the images and stories. One of the things I encourage people to do if they're interested is to start writing, because the better you become at writing these family histories and stories, the more you can kind of integrate them into whatever project you're creating. So, but if you have photos that have historical value, historical archives are going to be interested in it. The local museums, things like that, they're certainly worth investigating. If your family came from a small town in Nebraska, I had a client and they had, amazing photos of like the 20s and 30s, farm life in Nebraska. And like, oh my God, this stuff belongs in museums, or historical archives would love that stuff, because they're not going to take necessarily the physical assets, but the digital assets are easy to incorporate. And that's one way of doing it. And then you write those stories, and you're basically creating and contributing to the greater historical knowledge, right? Just a side note, if history has always been told by photos, by letters, by documents. And if you've seen a Ken Burns film, you know that, right? That's how we've told stories. In the digital age, we're kind of in danger of losing that. So we need to be responsible for preserving this stuff and in digital form, and making sure that it lives on, and that history will be accessible, whether it's family stories, or how your family existed in a historical context. It's a responsibility to preserve that and pass it on. So I know that's kind of a long-winded way of saying, if you don't have family to pass it on, but there is value to your family stories, histories, and photos. And you can just find it and then look for places for it to reside.
Excellent. Thank you. Jessica had a question about videos, and if those are uploaded to something like Vimeo, which is a paid subscription, what happens after they die? And if they don't want their children to be burdened with a subscription, should they download them? And sort of what device should it be on so it's not obsolete, or upload them? And if so, where that won't have a subscription? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, that's again, I was talking about companies who have no built-in succession, right? So, if you have a bunch of videos and you've been showing them to your family on Vimeo or YouTube or whatever, there's really no easy way to pass it on. So you have to if you've uploaded them, presumably you still have them. If not, you can download them, and they need to be in a self-contained video format that you can archive. You can put it on a hard drive and go through the process I outline in the course, or just at least touched on here, where it becomes, survivable by somebody, either yourself or a legacy contact, to keep the technology updated so that the information on the hard drive is passed on. Maybe we'll all be having little chips embedded in our skin. If that's what's coming, that's what's coming. But, to make sure that the information you have, the digital information, is self-contained, so that it can be kind of ported to the next technology. And then again, I kind of feel like I'm always going back to Forever and Permanent. Put them up there. If it's videos, I'd go with Permanent, because Forever's video subscription can be a little pricey, but it might be worth it. But those are the ways.
And do you have any suggestions on inspiring people or families who don't necessarily see the value of documenting their family history?
Can you say that again?
How would you approach or inspire situations where people might not see the value of documenting their family history and their legacy?
So what I do, and I'm a photo manager, photographer, whatever, but any, you show them what you've done. Show them what you've done. That will, and if you've created some personal archives, if you've created some books, some projects, some print walls or whatever, show them that. Talk about yourself. Don't try to convince them so much as let them, kind of look at yours and go, "Ooh, I want that." That always works the best, right? You can't really kind of lecture people, especially younger people. You know, again, I think when people start having their own families, they become a little bit more open to this stuff. But, if you want to try to convince somebody, don't try to tell them the merits, show them what you've done and inspire them that way.
Excellent. Um, and let's wrap up with one final question, which is someone saying they have 85,000 photos on their computer. Some came from other people. They're worried that it will be too hard to get those digital photos organized and make sure the dates are good, and also get rid of the duplicates before they curate the legacy collection.
Well, curating the legacy collection is the answer. That's the answer. So in other words, start going through them, and I go through a process in the course, uh, but you can figure out your own. And in the course, I say this is what I suggest, but figure out what's best for you. I say start with the older stuff that's been digitized, go through it, and start to kind of curate the stuff out of it that you want and put it in. Say if you're in Apple Photos or Google Photos or whatever, if you have albums or like virtual collections, start kind of create albums for different decades and start pulling them in there. And, if in doubt, pull everything in there that you think you possibly might want to preserve for your legacy collection. And then go back in, make a few more passes and remove some. And, by the end of the day, you'll have something. But you have to start somewhere. You could start with your older scans. You could start with your most recent digital images. But the curation process for the legacy collection is the answer to that question, as far as I can see.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Peter, for answering these questions. We really appreciate it, and for taking the time to share your insights on preserving a legacy earlier. As we share, we do have the courses on sale through February 21st. If you use the code Legacy10, we'll also share some follow-up emails with links as well as this recording. This recording will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. So be sure to subscribe to that so that you're notified when the recording is available, as well as future videos. And we thank you so much for joining us today. And Peter, thanks again for all your amazing insights today.
Thank you, Isabel, and thank you, everyone, and good luck. Have fun and enjoy the process.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.